CBS News estimates show President Biden and former President Donald Trump are both nearly close enough to have enough delegates to become their party's presumptive nominees. That could happen as soon as tonight. 4 states are holding presidential nominating contests today, including the battleground state of Georgia. Both candidates campaigned there over the weekend ahead of a likely rematch in November. And our new CBS News poll finds former President Trump leads President Biden in Georgia, 51-48. President Biden won the state narrowly in 2020. Joining us now is Anthony Salvanto. See you there in Studio 57. Good to be with you, Anthony, and thanks for sharing your polling here with us. So let's talk about Georgia, because it looks to be a battleground state yet again, maybe even a decisive one. How is that shaping up? What does it look like there? And what's changed or not since the last election in 2020?
Hey there, Caitlin. Yeah, it's like deja vu all over again, right? Georgia's going to be close. But look, in one context, Donald Trump now has an edge in a state that he lost narrowly. On the other hand, if you look at Biden's national matchup numbers against Donald Trump, this is actually a little better than that, maybe more so than you would expect. And here's what's underpinning to your question about what's changed from 2020. Well, this. You see, Georgia likely voters are less likely to think that Joe Biden's policies would make them better off than say so about Donald Trump. Incidentally, this is what we see echoing through the whole nation. This is what we see nationally, and it's true also in Georgia. Joe Biden has a lot of work to do to convince voters, as his campaign will, that it's his policies that'll help them because they have strong memories of Donald Trump's economy. That's part one. And then the other part here is I want to show you some very small percentages, because that's what this is going to be all about. Check this out. The number of people who voted for Biden in 2020 that now say they're going to vote for Donald Trump is just 7%. Then there's even smaller number who voted for Donald Trump in 2020, 3%, now saying they'd vote for Biden in 24. All of that underpins just how small an amount of shift and voters we may be focused on in Georgia for the next few months, Caitlin.
Yeah, those voters are going to be heavily targeted by both campaigns. So you mentioned Georgia as the battleground, but it was also, as people remember, the center of Trump's efforts to overturn the election. And I'm curious, as you're doing your polling, is that still on voters' minds? Are they thinking about that?
Yes, but it actually helps in some ways Donald Trump motivate his base. And this is something we've seen nationally, too. Take a look at this. This question, which has been through all the states and primaries, now it's here in this battleground state. If Donald Trump were found guilty, if there's a conviction, would you consider him fit to be president? Well, in this case, you get nearly 8 in 10 Trump voters saying yes, they would consider him fit. So that's not a lot of room for something like that to happen to change a lot of minds. And what that does is it plays into this idea very heavy among Trump voters and Republicans that those charges are politically motivated. That's what underpins all of that. Of course, Georgia was one of the centers of controversy and all of that. And fewer overall likely voters are more concerned that Trump tried to overturn the election. So the Biden campaign is going to try to push that, we know, and that's the gap that they have to try to close, Caitlin.
Yeah, that democracy argument that the Biden team is going to make as central to their campaign. Speaking of Biden, he and former President Trump are expected to possibly clinch the nomination tonight, or I should say their respective nominations in terms of winning the necessary amount of delegates needed to secure the nomination that comes at the convention. Anthony, walk us through how we got here.
Yeah, here we go. Tonight, you're going to see Georgia, their primary, close at 7 o'clock Eastern, right? They've got 108 delegates at stake. And then after that, at 8 o'clock, you've got Mississippi closing. Biden's 100 delegates away. So he's really on path somewhere in that 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock range to go over the top. And then for Donald Trump, it's just going to take maybe a couple of hours longer. He's got Georgia, he's got Mississippi he's looking at, and then out to Washington State here. And he's close enough that if he does very well, and we expect him to, does very well in those 3 states there, that he could go over the top. So that's how to watch tonight as the last delegates to go over the top unfold, Caitlin.
A good reminder, Anthony, that even though this isn't that suspenseful, the number of delegates still matter. Anthony Salvanto, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And joining us now is Taurean Small, who is in Atlanta. Taurean, good to see you. Excited to talk to you about your reporting. As we were just talking to Anthony about this idea that Georgia was really center stage for Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the election. I know that you have been speaking to election officials there. Are they thinking about this at all? What are they saying about the vote?
Yeah, absolutely, Caitlin, and it's not lost on voters as well. I mean, we were at a couple of poll sites, and every Democrat I spoke with, I asked the same question: "What's at stake at this in this election for you?" And they gave me the same answer each time I talked to them. They said democracy. Now, when it comes to state officials here, the Secretary of State's office held a press conference to pretty much give us a briefing on how this day is going. Some of the top lines there is a low turnout. We can expect that just based off what they were tracking. That definitely tracked when we went to these polling sites as well. But one thing that they wanted to underscore was the sanctity of these elections here. They said that election integrity shouldn't be doubted despite some candidates in the race. Take a listen to what the COO, Gabe Sterling, had to say earlier today.
We can't take mistakes and blow them up to conspiracies. We know there are people who do that. There are grifters who gain from that every single day. But Georgia's always focused on security first, and Secretary Raffensperger's made that a key to how we run elections in the state.
Yeah, so grifters is quite the rhetoric there, and it's seemingly a veiled shot at former President Donald Trump. Again, there are still people sore about Trump's categorization of the elections here in Atlanta. And like we've seen on the trail, Trump has said before that he's won Georgia twice. We know that is not true. But to his supporters, to Republicans out here, they firmly believe his messaging around that, and he is, like he's done before, starting to sow the seeds of doubt in the integrity of this election here in Georgia.
Yeah, Gabe Sterling does not shy away from those harsh criticisms of the former president. Taurean, I know you've also done a lot of reporting over the weekend, talking to Democrats and organizers. How are they feeling heading into the general election, with Georgia being such a key battleground state now?
They're cautiously optimistic, Caitlin. I've talked to some few grassroots folks who aren't necessarily connected to the campaign, but are doing every bit of door knocking on behalf of Biden because they see that he has a significant problem with getting his message out there. You know, several Democrats that I talked to say they like him and his policies. They've liked the impact that he's had on their communities. The problem is they just haven't done a great job of communicating that, and that's going to be the key issue for them moving forward. Again, in a state where Biden just narrowly won by 12,000 votes, if he's unable to communicate that well to inspire those same number of voters to come out this time around, it could be fatal for him. And the last thing he has to face here, and part of his challenge of rebuilding that coalition that got him over the finish line in 2020, is this uncommitted movement that we've seen happen across the country. It started in Michigan, 100,000 voters there rejecting Biden because of his stance on the Israel-Hamas war. And right now we're seeing folks here looking to do something similar around that 12,000 vote mark in order to scare Biden.
Something to keep an eye on tonight, even though we know what the results will be. Taurean Small, thank you so much for all of your reporting and that beautiful Atlanta backdrop behind you. I know it's a place that we will all be spending a lot of time heading into November. Good to see you.